I'm an assistant head of school. It's great to be here, and thanks very much, Aoife and Marion. It was wonderful to be. It's great to bring up the rear in such a great session. I'm an assistant head of school in electrical electronic engineering in TU Dublin, and keeping with the theme of assistive technology impact, this presentation is going to discuss the perspectives of higher education staff, and specifically their day-to-day practice in their roles. So next slide, Trevor, please. Yep. I've been working as a lecturer in higher ed for just over 20 years now, and together with many here, I've noticed an increase in learners with disabilities, as well as changes in disability prevalence, particularly in recent years. So working in and using technology routinely is certainly as part of my role in teaching. I have a natural interest in how this enables and enhances teaching, particularly in the context of assistive technology. It is a particular interest I have. Now, next slide, Trevor, please. The assistive technology, one of the great things coming after Aoife is she's done the heavy lifting on definitions already. I found in the literature upwards of 14, 15 definitions of what AT actually is. But I'm highlighting this one on the right, on the slide on your right here. It's very rare indeed to find a training manual that is ever particularly helpful, to be honest. But I just had to share this one because it comes all the way back from a very old training manual in the 90s. And I think it says it really clearly. Technology makes things easier for everyone, but for people with disabilities, it makes it actually possible and accessible. So, next slide. All research starts with an idea, but it always inevitably, and Aoife will know this better than anyone, it features an extensive literature review. Now, as well as the very academic and scholarly literature, because I'm looking at the Irish context of assistive technology usage in higher ed, it's important to look at the Irish context and specifically the practice and the legislation, our Irish legislation, our Disability Act, and all our reports, the so-called grey literature. So this is what I'm focusing on here, just to mention it. And starting with the UN Convention on Human Rights, which does mention technology usage. Our Disability Act does also refer to it specifically as well. And these are very heavily referenced in many of the policy documents that have come out in recent years, particularly related to quality of access to education. I'm going to be referencing the two on the bottom. It'll be your right-hand side on the slides in particular. The National Council for Special Education report, which was published a few years ago now, it feels like a short time ago, it's a few years now, on assistive technology and equipment and supporting. This focused on primary and secondary, but that has a knock-on effect going into third level, which I found. And also the Assistive Technology, a discussion paper report published by Enable Ireland and the Disability Federation Ireland. I found these reports very, very helpful. So, our next slide, please. This is just an extract from the latter report that I mentioned. It had a lovely case study in it, a very detailed one, and this is just a figure that I've brought out from it on higher ed, and the absolute benefits of the appropriate assistive technology being allocated to somebody, the life full of opportunity and access to the same earning potential that anybody else can have over somebody who doesn't. There was another nice piece, a very extensive survey, over 300 people surveyed, on the actual cost of assistive technology. And although it can run to very expensive to less expensive, the median cost of it was actually between 1,000 to roughly between 200 and 3,000 euros. So the actual cost of this is not a huge cost for many people, not for everyone. Next slide, Trevor. So this is my background and this is my context to Irish higher education. In 2017, the end of 17, beginning of 2018 is when I was starting to think about looking at this for a research project. I was embarking on an MA in higher education in TU Dublin. It was then the DIT, now TU Dublin. And I wanted to look at this in detail. I wanted to embark on a qualitative study and of people's practice, and it was technology, so I was looking at who looks after assistive technology in Irish higher ed. I didn't know a whole lot about it, to be honest. So, but I wanted to go into the facts and figures first. I'm in a numeric discipline, so it's always about the statistics first. At the time, the HEA had announced a target. They wanted 8% students, participants, to increase participation. It was part of an increasing participation across all of higher ed and further ed. So they'd identified the 8%, and now we've exceeded that, which is great. But the key number out of this is that approximately 4% indicate that they require support for their disability. So that's a sizable number of new entrants and existing students in the sector need support for their disability to access their education, be it higher or further education. Next slide. So the direct evidence of one of my own motivations for this work in my own practice and teaching a very long time, and my own practice and in talking to my colleagues, we have noticed the increase, rapid increase, particularly in the last 10 years, of students with disabilities in our lecture theatres, in our labs, who require accommodations, with not only students who are registered with our services, but ones with, as Aoife said, hidden disabilities, students who are struggling, students who are doing well, and all the spectrum in between. So this is the published, and I have to say we're blessed with the head on how well they track and break down all these figures, so we can look at them and use them for analysis. So next slide. This is another great image of the most recent numbers we have on prevalence. And if you look at these going back the last 4 or 5 years, there have been shifts in the category of disabilities that are showing across the higher education sector. The specific learning disability category, which is still the largest, has diminished a little bit in that it is the primary one, but students are now showing with more than one disability, and also there is a great increase in the mental health condition category now as well. It's something I'm seeing a lot in my practice. I'm now leading program boards. It's being discussed more and more. It's taking up more time, and it's an increasing cause of concern in higher education across the board. And other than that, then there are others. Just see a question, where's the pie chart from? It's from the AHEAD, the most recent AHEAD. If you look at the data and statistics section, then it's in the AHEAD publications. So it's a great resource. I really recommend you look at it. So this is on prevalence. Next slide, Trevor. So to restate the overarching purpose, to explore the prevalence and effectiveness of assistive technology usage, I interviewed 10 staff from 5 higher education institutions. So it was a decent enough spread to get a good look at what was going on there. Next slide. So this is a research overview. Research design, when you're designing a study in quite a short amount of time, you have to pay careful attention to what that research process is going to look like. So I chose the theoretical perspectivist, social constructivist, and an interpretivist approach. So case study is ideal for that. I wanted to do a deep dive. I learned that phrase here. This is a deep dive, and it's a great way to describe case study research. It's a collective comparative study. I'll explain that on the next slide. But the data collection is semi-structured interviews. Now, there needed to be some structure because there were specific things I wanted to ask. I've alluded to those in the introduction because I wanted to look at prevalence, I wanted to look at trends, and I wanted to look at practice. The population was 5 Irish HEIs, and the sample, I wanted to look at 2 cases, and that was AT officers and academic staff. So there were 4 of one cohort and 6 of the other. Next slide. The collective comparative case study, it's set out very well in a great book on case studies by state, because there are lots of different flavours of case study that can be done. But the 2 cases were the assistive tech officer and the academic staff. Now, the selection was careful, actually. It wasn't a random selection of that. I wanted staff that were very experienced for the reasons for looking at prevalence and for looking back over the last 10 years or so, because I wanted to investigate practice and if things had changed over the last 10 years as well. Interviews can be a very, very rich data set and very detailed data set. It can be very complex to analyse, and there are lots of different ways to analyse interviews, whether it's even if it's thematically, it can be done several different ways. I wanted from the outset to answer some specific questions about the 2 cohorts, while at the same time allowing people to talk about their roles, where they sat in the institution, the barriers, the enablers, all the different things people talk about their world of work, their communities, the rules they abide by, and how they go about their business. So next slide, please, Trevor. So to do this and to set this up, I used a framework, a theoretical framework, and this also became my analytical framework, the means I used to analyse my data. So it's called activity theory. So it's used to guide and organise the analysis of the interview questions, and then also to analyse the data that I collected, the interview data itself. First generation activity theory, which is being shown here, it features a subject working on to achieve an outcome via an object or the motive. So a subject is motivated to do something in their place of work using a mediational mean or a tool. This was proposed by Vygotsky in the late 70s, and he worked a lot on it to develop it into the 80s. If just one click, Trevor, please. And this moves on then to second generation activity theory, which is developed by Engstrom in the late 90s, and did a lot of work on this, looking at education and educational structures, basically. So the second generation activity system is more commonly used now because it incorporates rules, community, and division of labor. And all these elements in a subject or a person or a group of people's activity system is then used to analyze, and they're all interconnected on how they work together then to achieve a single or sometimes several outcomes via particular motivations. One click, Trevor. Two, please. So the part of this where this gets really interesting and also very, very useful is when contradictions, what are called contradictions. Now, conceptually, to understand this, they're called breaks in the system, commonly known and understood as challenges in a system. When there is a breakdown or a barrier in a system, or a miscommunication, or a lack of a rule in a community, that is when issues can arise. However, they can be viewed as opportunities for change in an organizational structure or in a group of people and how they work together. And finally, one more click, Trevor, please. You have a third generation activity system, and this is where things get really interesting, because if you have two cohorts of people, you can put these activity systems together, see what their objectives and motives are, and see if you can achieve similar outcomes. So that is how we looked at the data. It was coded, as interviews always are, in 3 rounds of coding, looking at themes, but these themes were deductively and then inductively coded to extract tools, subject, rules, community, division of labor, and contradictions via any barriers and enablers that may have come out from the data. Next slide. So this is what it looks like in activities here in education. Looks like this. It is technology is the obvious tool. I hope that would have started to become apparent. Learning is fundamentally the overarching objective. The identity, there are 2 identities being looked at in this study, the assistive technology officers and the academic staff. The community is where somebody works and all the people who are involved who work there. Rules are the spoken and unspoken, the written and unwritten rules that we abide by and are subjected to, and division of labor are who does what. Next slide. The assistive technology officer and the academic staff had to devise interview schedules. I won't spend too much time on this except to say academic staff are my cohort, they're my crew, so to speak. To design the other ones, I had to do some very careful piloting of the interviews, and the 2 schedules did have to look different because there were 2 different cohorts, but there was some careful piloting to ensure that I got accurate coverage to fully populate the systems to make sure that all questions were answered that I wanted, and at the same time then allow people to talk in and around all that as well. Next slide. So we're getting on to data now. So I interviewed all staff, so all 10 staff were interviewed over a period of several months, and I drew up activity systems for each person. Each person had their own, but that would take literally the day to present. So I'm presenting this as a composite activity system for the assistive technology officers. So all interview data is coded to each of these elements on the activity system for the 4 of the officers. So the important point to note about this is that all of the objects, all the motivations, all the things they had to do in their workplace as part of their practice are not applicable to all 4 of them. And one of the best examples of that would say advise and input on teaching and learning policy. P6 there in the green highlighted piece here on the right of the slide. Only one of the officers really did that in anger, and another was attempting to do it as part of his practice. That would be one example. But otherwise, the tools would be the assistive technology that they were using in addition to all other tools that most of us would use in our place of work. The rules would be the fund for students with disabilities. E-cohesion was mentioned quite a lot. Some were looking at frameworks for allocating assistive technology, though they were not used particularly in anger with the 4 officers that I spoke to. Reasonable accommodation and policy in the institutions. The communities were quite broad. I mean, everyone they worked with, the AT officers have a listserv online forum that's used quite a bit. and everyone that they would interact with. The division of labour then did vary because not all disability and access offices looked the exact same in each of the 4 institutions. Next slide, Trevor, please. The one for academic staff looks quite different because their environment is quite different, and it doesn't feature the assistive technology officers at all. It features the disability access office, but I didn't meet any academic staff bar one who had actually ever spoken to an assistive technology officer, which was interesting. The tools were mainly focused on educational technology. Only 1 or 2 academic staff, for example, would have used a live scribe pen. And I was using a live scribe pen myself to transcribe the interviews, and a lot of them asked me what it was. They didn't know what it was. So their rules were mainly exam and custom and practice. Student learning agreements they were aware of, but the objects were different. It was teaching, delivering teaching materials. 1 or 2 of the staff were piloting new ways of teaching using technology. 1 member of staff was developing inclusive ways of teaching and learning, but just 1 out of the 6. But the key thing about the 2 activity systems, the 2 composites, were the academic staff and the assistive technology staff. Ultimately, the intended outcome was very similar. Obviously, the AT staff, their outcome was, it was access and progression for a particular cohort of students. Next slide, Trevor. Now, this is where things get really interesting. The part of this here is that we're looking at contradictions. So these are the parts of the interviews where I'm getting into barriers and enablers. And what are the challenges in your workplace? And careful labeling is required here. And I'll just go through some of these. So an analysis in these systems is what provides, it allows you to analyze where things might not be going quite right in terms of organizational structure and in terms of a policy that might be missing, or just in terms of a workflow that might not be quite right, or that you need a new member of staff somewhere, or that a new role needs to be created on occasion. This is where this analysis can be quite powerful. But an example from the AT officer, one here, what is highlighted here is one between roles and objects, lack of formal assessment models, a lack of resources, resources meaning time, additional personnel and training. That came out very, very loudly from 3 of the 4 officers. Number 3 was a lack of follow-up. Some of the officers have no mandate to follow up on students once a piece of assistive technology has been allocated to them. And they saw that, their interpretation of that in follow-up questions was that the learner abandoned the assistive technology that they were allocated. There was also loud and clear, and this is why I mentioned primary and secondary education, the feeling that the learner had to jump through hoops to access their own technology repeatedly. You know, they had to get a report in primary school, in secondary school, and at 3rd level. And that really, that was a very cumbersome and difficult process to have to go through for the student. Student stigma was mentioned. So I was really happy. I was not surprised at Aoife's finding in her previous presentation because that was mentioned as well. There were limitations on time. Number 5, I'll be coming back to because that shows, that is flagging a lack of interaction with academic staff. Academic staff are shown in the community section here. Down here at the bottom of this slide, and all of the AT officers without exception mentioned a lack of interaction with academic staff, and there was a great want expressed for this, that they really wanted to interact more with academic staff. So number 5 is one I'm flagging it a little bit. So next slide please, Trevor. The academic staff ones then are very different. We're dealing with 2 very, very different cohorts of people in the same types of institutions here. And this is the reason, part of the reason why I chose activity theory, because it is a rigid structure and I wanted to keep the analysis in the same way. Okay, so 1A is, this was a very important one for me because I'm working on a data analytics project where GDPR and data privacy is primary, but I was surprised but not surprised to see this come up. Data processing and data privacy in academic staff, it's leading to issues with getting timely information in a way that's useful or can inform their teaching. As one staff member said to me, if I don't know a student has a disability and I'm too afraid to ask and I'm too shy to ask, how can I help them? So that was the quote I got from them. So that came up several times. It was 4 of the 6 staff said that, or words to that effect. B was part-time. Part-time students are not funded, so that was an issue as well. There was an issue with part-time students actually getting resources. Now, that has been flagged earlier in this seminar series, and the Fund for Student with Disabilities interim report did mention that they were aware of that issue and that it was going to be addressed. And I do believe that is being addressed, so hopefully something's going to happen there. And the 2 and 3 here are IT and e-learning support and access to IT and technology enhanced learning, that there were issues with resourcing. So it is actually IT support and TELP, that there were issues with actually getting the support and the appropriate support in a timely fashion. So that there were lots of issues around that. And the unintended outcomes in that, mainly in delays with staff receiving reports at the right time, receiving the right amount of information at the right time, and that they saw it as learners falling behind in coursework and not being able to recover. So those were some of the problems there. Next slide, Trevor. So this is one example of a third generation activity system. I saw a question earlier there. The third generation one is where you bring 2 activity systems from 2 separate people. And you basically...
Sorry, Catherine, the time is just up.
Sorry, Trevor.
The time is just up, if you can hear me. Hello? Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Trevor. Is that better?
Hi. Yeah, I can hear you now, Catherine.
Yeah.
Just
Sorry
say
about that. I have a hailstorm over me, so that's what's happening there. So I'll just keep going. There is
Catherine, sorry, the 20 minutes is up, so I
gave
you
your pardon.
like a minute
sorry,
or 2
I beg your pardon. I didn't realize
That's okay.
it was up.
That's okay. So I'm just going to stop sharing the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So just to say, Catherine, I think you're probably going to leave your video off just to tell the community.
Yeah.
Just because of kind of Wi-Fi and broadband issues.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of delayed that. So I'm going to leave it open to people. So if anybody wants to pose a question, or maybe there have been questions, I haven't been able to keep my eye on the Q&A box because I just had the presentation displayed on my own. So can I bring in Christine just to kind of, hi, hello.
A few people are raising their hands just in the session, just if they want to just put the questions in the Q&A and we'll be able to address them that way. There's, Catherine, a lot of conversation happening. I think you were kind of picking up on it as you were going along, but there's definitely, there's a great appetite here for the research. Even someone answered in the Q&A just to say that the time up was up because they really were just so interested in the research. So is it all right, Catherine, if I just kind of also just let people know they can look at the slides anyway on all of the slides on the web page, and they should have been emailed to everyone in advance. So hopefully people will be able to read through, but maybe we could also just advise people as well, just to kind of follow up with any questions now if they have any kind of key questions to go through. They'd love to learn more, love to hear more. Okay, it's almost like this peer pressure going on here, Trevor. We're going to be here all night.
Well, actually,
yeah, no, I'm really sorry about that. I'm having sound issues here with weather.
Okay,
so,
well, there's one question actually. Catherine, what was the main feedback from your study? If you could even just share maybe 1 or 2 kind of pieces. I know there's probably loads that came out of it.
Yeah, no, apologies for that. I just couldn't hear, and I lost track of time with because I couldn't actually even hear myself speak. The main issues that came out of it, if I could summarize, because it was a very dense data set, was that there's a lack of siloing. If I could summarize it in one word, is the siloing siloing within organizations is resulting in issues with, I think, academic staff being able to access information in a timely fashion, and also a need for professional development of both cohorts. Academic staff and disability officers need to be able to develop their knowledge in different ways. The assistive technology officers, and I think the disability service, and it's done in a really good report. It's on the last slide. There was a report done on this in the professionalisation of the disability service, and it was published by a head about the professionalisation of the service.
Yes,
there was a real feeling that came out from the assistive technology officers that they were just seen as tech support rather than, you know, officers who could assist with teaching and learning. And, you know, they're not just a support role, they're actually very well versed in UDL and other things. Only one academic staff member really knew anything much about UDL, and even then, when he was queried, that's just what I was getting to on that slide with the third generation thing, was that he said, okay, I want to know about UDL. And I asked him, who would you ask? He said, I'd go to the teaching and learning department. And I had spoken to the assistive technology officer in the same university, and that officer had just had a very, very difficult time trying to convince the teaching and learning unit to adopt UDL as part of the policy. They had rejected it as part of the policy, saying, no, academics don't want to know about that. That's too much for them. So the disability officer were trying to bring in a change or an enhancement with UDL, and teaching and learning were rejecting it. And then I was interviewing a staff member in the same organisation who wanted training in it and assumed that the teaching and learning would be where he needed to go. So there was this mismatch. This is a real example of a contradiction, as the theory presents it. So that's where that shows, you know, where an organization can improve its practices and its community. I mean, we were talking about communities of practice, but there are also structural issues in organizations that can be brought to light and unpacked by this analysis. So, and that is just one example. It's the UDL example, obviously, which is, you know, what we're all interested in. But there are others as well, the GDPR and the uncertainties around GDPR. And, you know, there's such confusion. I interviewed 3 academic staff from one institution, and each of them told me different things about how data is managed, how personal data of students is disseminated, communicated. I'm not saying any of them are incorrect.
Yeah.
But the messaging is not clear, and I think Aoife touched on it as well. It was so right that what she said was she thinks academic staff are nervous about asking, and that's what I heard loud and clear from academic staff. You know, oh, I couldn't ask a student that, because I asked them. I said, have you ever asked a student, you know, what their experience is, or how do they need help, or how that technology works, how their AT works? Oh, I couldn't do that. That's private. That's their private thing, you know. So these are the things that they need, that academic staff need. Academic staffing.
Hi, Catherine.
You
Are you back?
know, can you hear me now? Yeah. Academic staff need general disability awareness training. They need UDL and the technology training, and that was all touched on in the previous. It was great to see all that. But with the assistive technology officers, I really felt it was a very serious thing of professional identity. That there's an identity issue there, in that they feel they're being seen just as technicians in an admin room. And that was what came out really. That's a very overarching helicopter view of the situation. You know, it was a very detailed analysis. I was trying to pack in probably a little too much, but that is the overarching message. If that was the question. Apologies there, Christine. I just couldn't quite hear you properly.
No.
Well, Thomas O'Shaughnessy agrees with you. He said something about really interesting, Catherine, very large variance in how AT practice and policies are implemented in HEI. Difficult to summarize and compare, which is totally true. I mean, the good thing is there's a non-prescriptive approach, you know, in institutions, so they can adapt to their institutions and their different cohorts of students. I suppose the bad thing is that, you know, it's difficult to kind of regulate them that, but
yeah,
we do see.
I mean, yeah, not being prescriptive, I think is good. Because you know, if you prescribe something and then it doesn't work, then it's very hard to unpick it. But at the same time, it is really hard to some of the stuff that was unearthed in this. I was really surprised, and I didn't get to thank everybody. I really want to thank everybody who took part, because they were so generous with their time, and I went back and clarified a few things, and they were so generous in filling in the gaps for me and talking through their practice and what they did, and actually the process of allocating technology to students and all that, because as an academic that wouldn't be you know, that wouldn't be in my knowledge or experience. So it was a fascinating thing. The key takeaway for me on this is every AT officer I spoke to said nobody has ever asked us before and ever studied what we did, or no one ever asked us before what we thought about this.
Wow.
There's such a bank of knowledge there, it's massive, and they work so closely with students. And I think there's a sense of it goes nowhere wrong. It goes to the students, which is vital. But I just feel they want to get involved in research and teaching and scholarship. Just to touch on what Marion said, you know, that there's a huge scholarship opportunity there with the right resources and time and organising. That I think there's so much that there's a huge opportunity there for mining, if possible.
Yeah.
You know, we're all stretched and we're all really busy, but
yeah. Well, even with a lot of those AT answers now in, said, likes of Office 365, and I know I've mentioned like Google as well, like even that's a good starting place for an institution to kind of begin that discussion of AT, because, you know, those kind of inbuilt speech to text and text to speech kind of software and magnification, and you can color your documents if you kind of have kind of reading issues. So even coming from that angle of like start where with what everyone has already in terms of, you know, educating, you know, staff and students about AT and what it can do and how it can enhance, you know, your day-to-day academic life could be useful, I think, in terms of that conversation. And then to kind of, you know, mention the more specialized ATs then, you know, both for both staff and student purposes as well, because both have, you know, information to share and kind of gain from that kind of disclosure that can occur around that whole notion of AT. So
yeah.
I don't know, I can only see good things in the future about disclosure for both staff and students and sharing practices, because I know even with myself, telling students how I use technology in terms of how I study and learn definitely helped me engage. So I would love to kind of see more staff doing that. And I know there are staff who do it, whether they're lecturers or admin staff, or working in the library or whatever kind of service they use. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I said I was using the LiveScribe in the interviews for annotating and that for note taking, and then two of the staff who I interviewed went off and bought one, so that was quite nice.
Okay.
But, you know, I typed it into the chat box, you know, after Aoife was speaking as well. Somebody was putting up, it's Robbie Icky is here, and he said that you know, normalizing the use of this technology, I wouldn't say it would cure stigma issues. But I do think if we're using it and seem to use it, and everyone use it, that's part of a universal thing, is that if everyone's using it and seem to use it, it may go some way with that. Because I've used Say That pen for years. I've burnt my way through 4 of them. So it's only one thing. I love them. So, but the use of the technology is, people are intimidated by technology. I accept that. But it's here to stay. We wouldn't be here without it, even though mine has been failing me left, right and centre today. But it won't put me off, you know. But I really love doing the study, and thank you very much to everyone for this. It's
brilliant,
great.
like amazing to hear. Can't wait to see what kind of more further outcomes approach from this.